Ecclesiastes 7, verses 1 through 29. And you can follow on the screen behind me, or if you'd like, you can grab a blue Bible from the back of the sanctuary, and that's our gift for you to keep as well. All right, beginning with verse 1. A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. It is better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fools. This also is vanity. Surely oppression drives the wise into madness, and a bribe corrupts the heart. Better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the heart of fools. Say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this. Wisdom is good with an inheritance, an advantage to those who see the sun. For the protection of wisdom is like the protection of money, and the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of him who has it. Consider the work of God. Who can make straight what he has made crooked? In the day of prosperity be joyful, and in the day of adversity consider. God has made the one as well as the other, so that man may not find out anything that will be after him. In my vain life I have seen everything. There is a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his evildoing. Be not overly righteous, and do not make yourself too wise. Why would you destroy yourself? Be not overly wicked, neither be a fool. Why should you die before your time? It is good that you should take hold of this, and from that withhold not your hand, for the one who fears God shall come out from both of them. Wisdom gives strength to the wise man more than 10 rulers who are in a city. Surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. Do not take to heart all the things that people say, lest you hear your servant cursing you. Your heart knows that many times you yourself have cursed others. All this I have tested by wisdom. I said, I will be wise, but it was far from me. That which has been is far off and deep, very deep. Who can find it out? I turned my heart to know and to search out and to seek wisdom and the scheme of things, and to know the wickedness of folly and the foolishness that is madness. And I find something more bitter than death. The woman whose heart is snares and nets, and whose hands are fetters. He who pleases God escapes her, but the sinner is taken by her. Behold, this is what I found, says the preacher, while adding one thing to another to find the scheme of things, which my soul has sought repeatedly, but I have not found. One man among 1,000 I found, but a woman among all these I have not found. See, this alone I found, that God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes.
Church family, it's great to be back with you on another Sunday. All right, so we are continuing in Ecclesiastes, which teaches us that life is Hevel, which means breath. So breath in the sense of life is profoundly brief. And just like when we see our breath on a cold day, we can't quite grasp it. We can't control it. There is so much about life that's outside of our control. But yet the sooner we get this, the sooner we can enjoy life for what it is, rather than chase after things that's just as fruitless as chasing after our breath to get happiness and meaning and so forth. And Ecclesiastes, probably more than any other book in the Bible, gives us wisdom and teaches how to enjoy life, how to receive it as a gift. And I hope that this has become more real to you, that you've been coming alive more to the good gifts that God places in your life every single day. And the author takes a bit of a turn today. As you could hear, right, there's a bunch of proverbs in here. And essentially what he's getting at is, in this life that is so often outside of our control, right? We work and work and work, and then things do not go according to plan. Things often don't make sense in the way that we think they will. What's easy for us to do is just to get tired and to throw our hands up and say, why bother? And take the path of escapism. And all these proverbs are getting at, how can you stay engaged rather than checking out and running to escapism? I'm reading this book by author Tish Harrison Warren currently. It's really good, called Hope Grows in Weary Lands, and it's on resilience when life is difficult. And She talks about the fact that every Christian goes through seasons of aridity, or think like desert, arid, dry like a desert. And these periods of aridity, they shock us when it happens, but yet this is common for every believer ever. It's not that life is horrible. It's just not as electrifying as it used to be. So God feels distant, prayer feels like a burden, pointless. Work and relationships don't feel as exciting as they used to be. It's just like just like the fatigue of living wears on you. Maybe you find yourself where it's like at work or at church or wherever, you're just like, I just can't wait to get home. I just want to be home and exhale, right? I just need reprieve. And she says there are 3 approaches you can take when you're in this season of aridity and weariness. And one is flame out. This is where you blow up your life without regard to collateral damage. This is the dramatic, right, approach of, meltdowns and affairs. Or you can take the more common approach, which is not where you flame out, but where you numb out. This is escapism. It's the little avoidances, the little addictions, the slow lessening of putting in effort into people, right, into your work, where you just begin to check out in various ways. And she says then there's the third approach, which is much more difficult, but it's the path of wisdom and love, and that's to go deep, where you go deep into God, into repentance and relationships. And it's not just that you choose not to die, you choose to live, to engage life, even when life feels arid. And that's what this chapter is about. When you feel weary, when you begin to feel just like, what's the point? Rather than running to escapism, which that's the natural yet lazy and foolish approach, how can we engage God and others and love well? And so what we'll do is, right, this was a long passage. I'm sure all of you were listening with rapt attention to every single verse that was read, which was a great job, Mike. We're not going to marinate in every proverb, although each one is amazing. Instead, we're going to trace the broad themes here that we see in this passage on how to engage life well, especially when we want to just run to escapism, okay? So first, how do we engage life well? Starting with a bang in verses 1 through 4, we must keep death top of mind. Keep death top of mind. So he sets this up with the beginning of verse 1, a good name is better than precious ointment. So this is easy to nod your head to. So what good is it to wear great cologne and to have a fantastic outward appearance if every time somebody hears your name, they sigh? Right, so yes, can we agree with that? So just as character is better than how you look and smell, so is the day of death better than the day of birth. It is better to go into the house of mourning than to go into the house of feasting. And it's verses like this that make people think that the author of Ecclesiastes is this emo artist who's given up on life, but not at all. And what you should be asking is, are you saying death is better than birth and life? No, that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, especially in the context of what's come before and after in Ecclesiastes, is death is better than life because death is often a better teacher. Or put another way, can you learn more at a funeral or a birthday party? And while joy and laughter are great, Ecclesiastes says this more than any other book in the Bible, there's something about being confronted with death, whether that's your own death or the death of others, that can teach you and form you into a person of love and wisdom in ways that laughter and frivolity and superficialities never can. And so at a funeral, the fool is the person who says, when are we going to get to the pub after this? All this talk of death, it's so morbid. Whereas the wise person will linger at the casket and ask questions like, am I being a kind and gracious person to the people I spend the most time with? Am I prioritizing the things and people who are most important rather than just being caught up in the tyranny of the urgent and with just planning the next thing and the next thing and the next thing? Would people who experience me say I'm somebody who savors life? And when I'm with them, they give me the sense that they're thinking, I'm so glad you exist. Is that the kind of person that I am? Because death and sorrow, it gives us an opportunity to reflect on how precious life is and to think about, like, am I ordering my priorities and my attitudes appropriately? And then he continues, sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. Or a more literal translation is, the heart is goodened by sadness of face. And you ask, well, how is the heart goodened by sadness of face? And maybe you could just think about, at least for me, the most jovial and deep people of character I know are those who have gone through the deepest grief and have allowed Christ to meet them in it, right? Because there's something about going through sorrow where if you let him, God will form you and shape you and awake you to the preciousness and gift of life that living a life of ease never can. And maybe this is best conveyed through a personal illustration. So recently, Kelsey and I found out that one of our most beloved family members has a terminal diagnosis. And until this diagnosis came, we assumed we'd have decades more to enjoy with this individual. And then suddenly we're told we're looking at months. Like, it's just a scientific fact. And while a lot of times, we'll spend time with our kids with this person, those moments are sweet. What Kelsey and I often do is we'll alternate watching our kids so that we can spend one-on-one time with this individual. And we'll both tell you that this is the most painful grief we've ever experienced. And yet these one-on-one mornings and afternoons that we've shared with this individual have been some of the happiest moments of our lives. Because by sadness of face, the heart is made glad. It's just, in a way that reading about loved ones passing never can, it's awakened us to the treasure of this person and our other relation. And it's spilled into how we parent and how we think about our friendships and other family members in a way that, right, so that this upcoming death is not good, but it has enlarged our hearts and lives in a way that a life of ease never would. And we could choose the path of escapism. Let's just not talk about it, right? Or we can enter into it and allow God to grow us. And so then he concludes in verse 4, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. So Jesus is just stating what he's been saying. The fool is the one who says, why are we going to talk about death? I know it's going to happen. It's morbid. No, the wise says we should talk about it because it's going to awaken us to what's most important. And so an application here is, I recently heard in an interview this old man who lived a successful life. He's in his 80s now, and he says, just statistically speaking, I'm about 3 to 4 years from my death. And so a practice me and my wife have now every morning is as we're having breakfast, we look at each other and we ask, is today our last normal day? He says, people hear about this, they go, why are you doing that? That's so gloomy. He says, no, that's biblical, actually. And it helps us laugh more, be more kind to each other and to other people. And so a practice that I've adopted now is when my feet hit the floor and I go out for my early morning walk, I ask and I pray the question, is today my last normal day? And even if you're not this type of, I encourage you to try this practice because I think you'll find, as I have, that it really has shaped so much of how I parent, how I work, how I prepare for a sermon, like what I'm doing right, how I meet with each of you, how I engage with my family. Just ask, is today my last normal day? It makes a huge difference in how we love. So point one, how do we engage well, right? Rather than running into escapism, we keep death top of mind. Is today my last normal day? Point two, how do we engage well and not run to escapism? We lean into the uncomfortable. Lean into the uncomfortable. So verses 5 through 10, broadly speaking, address different ways that we seek to avoid hard realities rather than face them head on. And since we don't have space to go through each and every one, let's linger on the bookend verses, verse 5 and verse 10. So verse 5, we can sum this up as receive and provide critical feedback. It's better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. So escapism is when you say, I'd rather live in the self-delusion of my own self-perception rather than face the reality of who I really am, which is going to include some really amazing things and some areas that are painful to look at, areas that I need to grow. And so the wise are those who listen to rebukes of the wise. How do I need to grow? And so just a question to ask is, those who know you best in your home and in your work say, how would they say you respond to critical feedback? My marriage counseling professor taught me that a top 5 indicator of marriage health is how both spouses, if they're able to ask the question, what is it like to live with me? How do you experience me? And respond positively to that answer. Right? And this is true for any relationship, a sign of friendship health, work relationship health, family health. Because if you can't ask that question and respond positively, it shows that you're unwilling. You want to run to escapism. You don't want to look at reality for what, because it's hard to look at the areas that you need to grow. And yet it's necessary to become a person of love. And the times that I have grown the most have been when people have loved me enough to say, Steve, I love you. And here's this part of you that either just, but you have not changed. Or I don't even think you're aware of this. But like, here's how you come across sometimes. And so how do you respond to critical feedback? It's vital for growth. Or we all need cheerleaders, right? But do you only run to the cheerleaders who tell you what you need to hear? And conversely, we need to be people who do it for others as well. Some of us, we're actually great at receiving it, but we would rather die 1,000 deaths than wade through the discomfort of telling somebody else how they need to grow. And yet it's one of the best acts of love you can do for somebody to help them grow. And for those of you who maybe some of you love doing this too much, but for those of you who you're like, yeah, I know I should tell this person this because I think it'll help. I just don't know how to do it. Just some language that might help is you can try something to this degree. You can say, hey, don't tell a story as you head into it. Just get right to it and say, hey, I'd like to talk about something with you. It'll probably be an uncomfortable conversation, but we're going to do it together. And so that way, okay, they know it's going to be uncomfortable, but you're with them in it. So you're telling them right at the outset, I'm not coming at you, but we're going to do this together. And we can help one another grow together. So how do we engage well? We lean into the uncomfortable by receiving and providing critical feedback. Right? This is the path of wisdom. And second, in verse 10, we take action and we love well today. Verse 10, say not, why were the former days better than these? For it is not from wisdom that you ask this. Every person over 18 should memorize this verse. Nostalgia. The good old days when it never rained and my heart was just only filled with contentment and laughter and joy. We do this with a future orientation as well, right? Where it's not just where we look back to former days that were better, but we're not living in we're living in the future. Like when I just need to make it to Friday night. I just need to make it to my upcoming vacation. Parents of young kids, I just need to make it to bedtime. And both to camp out in either of these realities, right? Pining for the past, and I might be the most nostalgic person in the room. Second, maybe only to the Clowrays. right? But to camp out in either of these worlds, the past or the future, it's to live in a fairy tale. And so you know the movie The Odyssey that's out, right? Directed by Christopher Nolan. Yeah, okay, we have a fan. I haven't seen it yet. But it's generating a lot of buzz. And, so theaters are selling out for people to sit for 3 hours to be totally engrossed in this film. Bookstores have been commenting how people are just flooding into bookstores. People who never even used to think about Ithaca or Penelope are now asking what's the best translation, of the Odyssey that I should buy? And we should ask what is it that's capturing so many people's hearts about this story? And I think in part because the Odyssey, yes, it's about adventure and virtue and these kinds of things, but I think at its heart, one of its central themes is a longing for home, right? To finally be in the place where it's just endless exhale, where everything fits. And both this longing for better days or just fixated on some future moment that's going to be better, both of these are what? They're a longing for home, right? Where I just want to be in a place where things aren't so tiring or painful or fatiguing. And these longings, they're God-given. They're part of our humanity. The problem is we look for them in the wrong places. They're supposed to draw us toward God, but instead we use them to go into these fairy tale lands. And so when we camp out in the past or the future, commentator Derek Kidner, he points out there's a double folly to this kind of rumination. And so the first is, especially when it comes to nostalgic longing, is were the good old days really as good as you remember? Because I think if you were to teleport yourself back, right, to that apartment, that hillside, that place, it would probably still be lovely, but yet you'd also find so many of the same grievances and aches and irritations that were with you then, just as they are now. Right, so rarely are those moments actually as good because we screen out the negative parts. But then the second and more important folly about the fairy tale of the past and the future is often we tend to live in one of these two realms to avoid taking action in the present. Because the people who are most engaged and loving to their families and their work and their relationships aren't the people who are sitting and laying around wishing it were yesterday. There are people who are aware of the fact that the kingdom of God only ever takes place in the present. And so is it good to be grateful for awesome memories and to anticipate future joys? Absolutely. But when I bemoan days that are no more, and when I'm only thinking about putting my kids to bed or getting to Sunday afternoon when this sermon that's giving me anxiety is over, I can't love you well. I can't love my family well. And so let's be people who don't run into escapism, but love well today with the real people and in the real frustrations that are with us today. And as we keep death top of mind, what if today is our last normal day? We only have today to love well. Okay, so we keep death top of mind. We lean into the uncomfortable by giving and receiving positive feedback, because we want to grow. And we live and love well today. Number 3, how do we engage well? Is we also see the limits of wisdom. And this is I'm just going to lump the remainder of the chapter, verse 11 through 29 in here, the limits of wisdom. So this is so Ecclesiastes. So verse 11, wisdom is good and an advantage. Verse 12, it preserves the life of him who has it. So wisdom is good, run after it. And yet, wisdom doesn't solve everything. And the rest of the chapter gives a number of examples on how wisdom doesn't solve everything. Now let's look at just a couple of examples of this. First, wisdom doesn't guarantee, how did I phrase this? It doesn't give you a morally predictable life. Wisdom won't make life morally predictable. Yeah. So verse 15, in my vain life, or Hevel life, my life that's a breath, I've seen everything. There's a righteous man who perishes in his righteousness, and there is a wicked man who prolongs his life in his evil doing. Wisdom means that you realize that no matter how good you live or how good other people live, horrible things happen to good people. And good things happen to horrible people. And you need to know this. So you'll see innocents in America and abroad murdered, while corrupt leaders who contributed to these deaths dine on the finest fare. And you shouldn't be too confused by this. Because life is not how it's meant to be. And this is why Ecclesiastes and why God from A to Z in the Bible has been trying to awaken us to this lesson so we're not repeatedly shocked when it happens. Right? The world often is crooked like this because of sin. It's the Bible's honest diagnosis of the human bent to use God and other people for our own ends. And so this is why horrible things often happen to good people. And good things can happen to horrible people. And yet God in his kindness, right, this is why God hates sin so much. And why in his kindness, he's redeemed us and is redeeming us from it. And he's doing something about it. And he invites us to participate with him as his beloved in making all things new. And so in light of this reality, verse 16, be not overly righteous, which in context probably means don't have the kind of self-righteous naivete, which assumes that if I live a good life, good things will happen to me. And only good things will happen to, horrible things will never happen to good people. Like often we say we don't believe in a prosperity gospel, right? America's worst export, maybe, this idea that if I live a good life, God will always bless me in the now. But yet then I think our reactions to suffering betrays otherwise, right? So don't be so naive to think that in this life you won't suffer. And then, verse 17, be not overly wicked. So don't take the approach of, well, if I can live faithfully to God and I might still suffer, why bother? While that might be an understandable reaction, and God gives voice to this reaction all the time in the scriptures, to stay engaged and not run to escapism means we continue to live faithfully to the Lord and know that he's with us in our sorrows and in our hurts. So we just have to be so careful, because the more wise we become, there can become this temptation where we begin to assume that we know how life is going to work out, how it's going to work out. But part of wisdom is knowing life isn't always morally predictable. Second, what's the limit of wisdom is it can't make you righteous. Verse 20, surely there is not a righteous man on earth who does good and never sins. So just like the more wise we become, we can begin to think we've figured out life until life rudely reminds us that we haven't figured it out. It can also be easy to forget that there's not a righteous person on earth, including you and me. And this is so important to remember, especially when you're dealing with somebody who's just so hard to deal with. Like, we have to remember all the time that we do not stand righteous. Righteous means a right way of relating to God and people. Right? You and me, we all carry our burdens and brokenness and petty ways of behaving into every single room that we enter. And so that's why verse 29 ends with, see, this alone I found, God made man upright, but they have sought out many schemes. Summary of the Bible. God made man upright, Genesis 1 and 2. He made us good, upright, righteous. but they have sought out many schemes, Genesis 3 onward, our insistence on going our own way. So wisdom can't make us righteous. And that's the end of the chapter, which may seem like, which, by the way, the chapter breaks, they were imposed later on. But so we end with a bit of an ellipsis here, in part because we have to choose a section for a sermon, but also because Ecclesiastes is in dialogue with the rest of Scripture. Right? So this might seem like a strange place to end, but this is where we need to remember that Ecclesiastes asks us questions to which the rest of the Bible gives us the answer. And this is where we need to see that while wisdom is good, and we should seek it, it can't make us righteous. And like up until now, whether you've been in the church for a long time or this is your first Sunday in church, please do not hear Christianity is about life optimization tips. Like, here's how I can not get caught in nostalgia but love well today. Here's how I can respond well to feedback and to give it. Like, we do grow in those things, but fundamentally Christianity is not about engaging life well rather than running to escapism. Because even that is not enough. Because what we need more than learning how to engage well, learning wisdom, is we need something or somebody far bigger. We need a person, and his name is Jesus. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 24, Jesus is referred to as the power of God and the wisdom of God. And consider how Jesus fulfills a number of these proverbs. His is the good name above every other name that's more precious than ointment. Can you think of a person for whom this verse is more true? By sadness of face, the heart is made glad. For by the sadness of Jesus' face in his life and when he went to a cross to die for you and me, our hearts can be made glad. The day of death better than the day of birth. Because of Jesus' death, you and I don't have to fear death. And because of his resurrection, we know that our death, if you're trusting in Jesus, is the passageway into a life of no more aches or crying or tears. Jesus is the man who rebukes us, but never to belittle us, only to help us become wise and to grow. Jesus never pined for the former days, but always lived in the present to save us. He always kept death top of mind. He's always talking about his death to enable him to love well in the present. And speaking of thinking about longing for the past or future, you know when Jesus is with you, including this very moment, he's not wishing for a past version of you. Yeah, remember that time when you were just like really on fire for me? I wish you could be that person again. Or I'm just waiting for you to become a better person. You know, he loves you right where you are. We could go on and on. And through Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, he gives you union with him, where you become one with him, where he makes you righteous, which means it's not just that he, the triune God, treats you as if you've never sinned, but also treats you as if you'd always obeyed and have always done the most honorable things, just as Jesus did and does. And he enables you to become wise. Through union with him and attachment to him, you become more spiritually discerning. He gives you the power you need to engage life well and not run to escapism. And through union with Jesus, he gives you home. In John 14, he says that home is with him and he with you, which isn't just a future reality, by the way. It's something you really can begin to enjoy today and then will be consummated in the life to come. And so we don't have to long for the past or the future. We have home with Christ now. And so as we head into this week, there are tons of proverbs in here. We went over a few. Encourage you to maybe just take one proverb. It might be keeping death top of mind. It might be growing and receiving critical feedback or giving it. It might be loving well today and not living in a fairy tale. But choose it, memorize it, consider how Jesus fulfills it for you and enables you to live it, and then go out and live it with him this week.